My name's Bob Darrell, and I am an alcoholic. Only through the grace of a God that I was afraid to believe in, that I found out through the steps, is crazy about me and has no taste. Good sponsorship and a persistent and consistent commitment to the primary purpose of helping other alcoholics. I haven't had a drink or any mind or emotion-altering substance since Halloween 1978. For that, I owe you my life and my freedom. That's all right. Applaud AA if you want. Don't applaud me. I can show you what I did with my life before I got to you. It wasn't good. Chuck was up here, he was having trouble with the microphone. It kept twisting. I kept thinking, someone told me once that microphones take on the personality of the person who uses them. I want to thank Lee for and John and and I know there's a whole gaggle of people involved in putting this thing on. And just for those who need to know, this is the second Woodstock of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to throw, because I could not say that. I'm just that way. I am really delighted to be here. There's a lot of what I am today and how I've connected the dots in Alcoholics Anonymous with the program and myself have come from people that are in this room today, this weekend. From listening to them, I've found me. And I've found a lot of stuff I've found in AA, and I think that's how we do it here. Nobody can tell us anything. We listen to people talk about themselves, and the lights go on, and we make those connections. And there's a lot of people in this room that have helped me to find myself in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if there's anything I can bring to bear, it's probably a combination of what I found in AA and what I found in other people's experience that passes through me. This is like a passing the baton in the biggest cosmic relay race. I mean, just here, and it goes through us. I want to read something out of the 12 by 12. I'll start out with this. I was frantically trying to find it. I call it the 12 by 12. Somebody always says something. It's not the 12 by 12. It's the 12 and 12. Well, I got in the habit of saying that 30 years ago because that's what I was told that I would frame my life with the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. And then it gets depth and dimensional when I add the concepts and get into service. This is a paragraph that really talks about my primary problem once I get sober. It's from page 53 of the 12 and 12. It says it's from our twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that many of us have suffered the most. We have been especially stupid and stubborn about them. The primary fact is that we fail to recognize is the total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. Our egomania digs two disastrous pitfalls. Either we insist upon dominating the people we know, or we depend upon them far too much. If we lean too heavily on people, they will sooner or later fail us, for they are human too, and cannot possibly meet our incessant demands. In this way, our insecurity grows and festers. When we habitually try to manipulate others to our own willful desires, they revolt and resist us heavily. Then we develop hurt feelings, a sense of persecution, a desire to retaliate. As we redouble our efforts at control and continue to fail, our suffering becomes acute and constant. We have not once sought to be one in a family, to be a friend among friends, to be a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society. Always we have tried to struggle to the top of the heap or to hide underneath it. This self-centered behavior blocked a partnership relation with any one of those about us. Of true brotherhood, we had small comprehension. I wish that was only true. I wish that kind of just stopped as when you stop drinking. Alcoholism's a lonely business. And in my experience, it's lonelier when you stop drinking. At least alcohol, there's a line in our literature that says that at one time it allowed us to act extemporaneously. That means I could come out. I could become external. I could get free of this prison up in here. And then in the last days of drinking, it doesn't work like that anymore. And the countless futile attempts to become extemporaneous, the countless futile attempts to get free, and I can't. And that's when our book, A Vision for You, says we will know loneliness such as few do. I heard Chamberlain years ago say that alcoholism was a disease of separation. And when he said that, it just hit me because I always had feelings of being separate and apart from. I always had feelings of not fitting. I've always had this sense of an invisible yet impenetrable barrier between me and life itself. That I could not, on my own, sober, break through. Now, there was a time when 5 shots of whiskey and the barrier would just dissolve and I'd come out, I was free. I was a free man. But so I'd get sober again and I'd always be kind of locked up inside of me. Which, oddly enough, I'll tell you a little story. I know Tom has had this experience, and there's a lot of people in this room. Occasionally, maybe once every year or so, I go to a prison in Central Coast of California that's a supermax prison. And this is where most of the lifers end up. And there's a huge AA group in there, 150 guys, I guess, and they have like a line of greeters, and there's an energy in that room that is amazing. And you have guys that are lifers that will never, ever get out of prison, and they're sponsoring guys, and they are freer. I'm telling you, they're freer than guys I sit on the outside with that are free to walk around the earth. They're freer. Because freedom is really, there's only one thing that I ever have to be free from, and that's the bondage of self. I drank for it. I do AA for it. It is essential to who and what I am to be free. Because I know what it's like to be abstinent and locked up. And I'll tell you something, it's no wonder that I go back to drinking. Eventually. And I go back to drinking with a desperate hope of busting out, of getting free. Years ago, I was at a meeting. I was pretty new, maybe in my first year. And some people I ended up going to this 12 and 12 meeting, and they were on the traditions, which the minute I found out that, I wanted to leave. Right? Because I don't want to, that's fine. It's the traditions to me in Alcoholics Anonymous is like the 55 mile an hour speed zone. I think it's a good idea. But I'm in a hurry here, right? And I think they should be in place for you. You people need to. So why do I think you should practice the principles? So you will maintain AA for the most important person in the universe, me, right? But personally, I like that guy in that Humphrey Bogart movie. Traditions. I don't need no stinking traditions. And I'm self-centered. I'm in the extreme. Book says we're extreme examples of self-will run riot, though we usually don't think so. And I don't think so. So I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and this will sound very bizarre, but this is my perception looking back. In the groups I went to, I don't even think I realized there was other people there with problems and stuff for a while. It was like when I was new, I think I thought my name was "Does anybody want to share?" Right? And I would take a whole meeting hostage, about my life and my problems. Very self-centered, very self-centered. And then what happens? Because of self-centered fear, and only because of that. This is the only place I've ever been where you took my defects of character and made them into some, and used them to help me. And because of self-centered fear and my concern with what you thought of me and what the old-timers and my sponsor thought of me, I got into service in AA. Didn't really want to. I thought it was an inconvenience. But I started to do it. And then what happened is I started to care about a couple people. A couple guys that I'd been involved with. I was on the 12-step call with them. Or I had talked to them and spent a little time after a meeting in the detox. Or a guy that I saw come out of the jail where I took a meeting. And you know how that thing that always starts to happen in our hearts, where somebody else becomes important to you. And then all of a sudden my world gets a little bigger. And then I started really falling in love with the people in my home group. I would to the point where if somebody wasn't there, I'd be worried. Where'd they go? Where's so-and-so? Now this is a guy who doesn't worry about anybody except himself, and I started to worry about people in my home group. And then I got into general service, and I started being concerned with other groups in my district and then in my area. And then eventually I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide. Is the most amazing thing. And I've been in meetings in all over the world. I mean, and it's the same thing. The magic exists everywhere we come together. But we almost didn't survive ourselves. And one of the things that I started getting into the traditions when I started getting into general service. A guy in AA said something to me that really I've thought about to this day. He said, none of this means anything until it means something to you. In other words, I have to personalize this stuff. As long as these are just some vague set of rules for you people, they really don't mean anything to me. And a guy used to say that he thought that the practicing personally of the 12 traditions in his life with relationships with people, family, work, was what allowed him to be a part of there. And for a guy who doesn't fit sober very well, that was a program of attraction for me. Because I wanted to fit. I'm everything that it talked about in that paragraph in the 12 and 12. I am all of that, sober. I don't mean to be. And I can pretend all I want. It doesn't change it. I'm the separate guy. I'm the guy where it's all of you and then there's me. And I can't will that away. The book says we can't will our self-centeredness away. We can't wish it away any more than alcohol. And I couldn't do that. And it was really in the implementation of the 12 steps and the 12 traditions in my life that I started to fit, not just in Alcoholics Anonymous, but also out in the world. I ran a company for a lot of years sober, and we had a lot of employees, and I ran the company on the 12 traditions. And they didn't know where they came from. They didn't even know they were called the 12 traditions. But in our staff meetings, we would talk about the principles. We would talk about their application. We'd talk about things like setting ourselves aside for the greater good. And you know something? I'm amazed to this day how normal, everyday people, they get all of this. You got to about kill me to open my mind up to some. And normal people, they just go, oh yeah, the whole's better than the. Oh yeah. And I don't do that. I got the great call of every alcoholic I've ever met. Yeah, that's fine, but what about me? What about me? And it starts in the steps. And I think accumulates and really comes to fruition in the traditions is where I set myself aside for a greater whole and a greater good and a greater purpose. Some of you know a little bit about the history of the traditions. I just want to talk about this real briefly because just because it's important. I don't consider myself as an historian, but in the mid-40s, mid-40s, AA was in a lot of trouble. And Bill was becoming very concerned, and through a series of coincidences, how God works through us, he discovered information about a group called the Washingtonians that he didn't even know existed. And in his concern and worry for the future of Alcoholics Anonymous, and Bill loved AA, and Bill loved drunks. I identify so much with Bill Wilson because Bill Wilson was very flawed. Bill Wilson was not a perfect guy at all, but he loved alcoholics. And he loved Alcoholics Anonymous, and he loved the idea of hope for generations of us. And out of that, his worry and love, I think, came this traditions, which I'll tell you something. This sounds strange, but maybe 2,000 years from now, Alcoholics Anonymous will not be known for its steps anymore. Maybe it'll be known for its traditions. You know, this to this date, science has never come up with a permanent cure or an ability to eradicate alcoholism. But now they're doing some DNA stuff, and where feasibly they could remove the things out of the species that create alcoholism. And then if that's true, the steps will become like sort of academic, very nice, but academic. There won't be people coming to the table with the desperation of dying men as we have. But maybe 1,000 years from now, the 12 traditions will be known for the most unifying force in humanity. And when Bill put these in place, when he created them, he tried to put them in place, he created the long form, which unfortunately most AA members today, the majority of people here, in AA, maybe not in this room, because this is like, the people that come to a weekend like this are very enthusiastic about AA. But across the board in meetings and clubs and around the country, most people have never even heard of the long form. But they know the short form. And the reason the short form evolved is that Bill could not get anybody excited about the long form. Matter of fact, he couldn't even get anybody to read them in meetings. I mean, you know why? You know why, right? Because they're long, right? And well, that's all good, but you're cutting into the important stuff when we could be talking about me here, right? And so Bill was very frustrated. There's even letters in our archives where groups had asked Bill to come and speak, provided that he agrees not to mention the traditions. And Bill struggled with that. And then in a desperate concession, he conceded to an abbreviated version. I've talked to a lot of people over the years. There's speculation on who wrote them. Did Bill write them? I've heard people say that they think that it was a collaboration between Tom Powers and a couple other people. I don't know. I'm not that. There may be people in this room that have more information about actually who wrote the short form of the 12 traditions than I do. But I've sensed, and I can't prove this, but I sensed Bill's reluctance. I think he really wanted to stick with the long form, and he conceded to them. Whether he conceded and wrote them himself, or he conceded to a collaboration, I don't know. But he conceded to them, and they were adopted in 1950 by the groups at the first conference in Cleveland. And they've been part of our program ever since. I've suspected at times that we took a hit by going with the short form. I think the long form has more meat. It has more substance for Alcoholics Anonymous. I think the long form keeps us more focused on what we're about. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. Maybe in the bigger picture, maybe the shorter form has opened the doors wider, and maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I don't know. I'm try not to have an opinion about that, even though I do. But I try try not to. I want to just kind of go through the traditions, very much like the steps. They're laid out almost very similar. Step one, you define the problem. Powerless over alcohol, drunk and sober. Oh, if only my powerlessness over alcohol stopped where the bottle stopped, then there'd be no relapse in Alcoholics Anonymous. Once you really, not like the other 20 times, but once you really made up your mind, you'd be good to go. But I am powerless over its call to my spirit that gets sick, even when I'm sober. I am really powerless. And I can't manage my own life. You know that because you tried a lot, didn't you? Oh, yeah. And the problem really is defined in the first tradition is a lack of unity. Not only is that the problem in Alcoholics Anonymous, it is the problem of the spirit of a business or a company, of a family, of an AA group, of myself, and the loneliness and separation of untreated alcoholism. The problem is that when I get sober, I don't fit anywhere. And because of that, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what you'll think of me. I'm afraid that you don't accept me. I'm afraid of all that. And I have this ego that rises up and tries to run the universe to make it right. And my making it right makes it more wrong. Always, 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 always. I guess that's the core of the reason I can't manage my own life. There's this thing about unity. There was a letter that Bill Wilson received from the great psychiatrist Carl Jung in the early 60s. And Jung said something to Wilson. I have a copy of the letter if anybody wants. It's an amazing letter. There's a lot of good stuff. But one of the things that really hit me was that he said that as a result of working with Roland Hazard and other alcoholics, that he had came to believe that the alcoholic's thirst for alcohol is not really a thirst for alcohol. He says it's a low-level thirst of the alcoholic's being for wholeness, connectedness, unity, or union with God. And I drank for that, really. I drank to be a part of. I drank not only to fit with the guys I drank with, but to feel like as if this was my planet, my home planet. Because, I used to have fantasies about flying saucers realizing that they'd left me here and coming and getting me. I never felt like I fit. That's why I love that book, Chariots of the Gods. I remember reading that in jail one time going, they left me here. This lack of unity really is the deal. In the long form, I love the way it's worded. It says that each member is but a small part of a great whole. Now that's the first inclination that I'm supposed to set myself apart or down in order to something. The whole is greater than me and more important than me. That's a big deal for self-centered people like me, to act and take that position and that angle of approach, not only in Alcoholics Anonymous, but at work. I could not become successful in work until I started to apply this principle and the principles of the traditions. My first 4 years of sobriety, I went through 9 jobs in 4 years. And I could have told, every time I either left or was fired, I could have explained it to you how it wasn't my fault. But I am the seat and the source of my separation and conflict. I am the guy. And I couldn't have told you that because my ego exists to justify itself, to explain itself, to defend itself. But I am the guy. And when I started, Chuck Chamberlain really hit me with something. When I was talking to him, he told me something, and he'd probably said it in talks before. He used to also say you can only hear what you can hear when you can hear it. And one time I talked to him after a meeting. He spoke just for a couple minutes, and he said I was getting ready to quit the 9th job I had sober. And because of them, right? And he said to me, kid, you have it all wrong. The fact that how much you're appreciated or paid or how more work you do than anybody else or all that stuff's none of your business. He said, you got to go to work for one reason and one reason only. And that's to help God's kids. And if you'll go to work to be of service and forget yourself and ask God to help you, to put you aside, he said things will change in this area. And only because I was desperate and I was scared, because I was afraid I was going to be the guy that was 30 years sober that had 30 jobs and hated every one of them. Like I could show you guys like that in AA. I was afraid I was going to be that guy. I was afraid that I was going to be an endless, forced life of going to work and feeling like I'm doing time there and hating it. And only because of that was my mind was open to what Chuck said. And I started to try to put myself aside, and I'd ask God to help me to go to work, forget myself, and go to work every day and just help God's kids. And my whole employment world turned around. It was the most amazing thing. It was what happened? You know that feeling that you have in your home group because you have a commitment there and you're greeting people and you're concerned. And I started to feel the same connectedness in the job that I felt in my AA group. Because I'm setting myself aside and serving a purpose greater than me, which is you. There's a lot of descriptions of lack of unity in the book. Page 52 is a great description of it, of what you could consider, some people would consider untreated alcoholism. It says we were having trouble with personal relationships. That might not be big in Florida. That's a big deal in Nevada, I'll tell you. If I get a call from a guy at 3 a.m, this is it. This is what it's about. It's not about... he's mad about they changed the TV night for his favorite show. We couldn't control our emotional natures. What's Silkworth say? That when we stop drinking, we become restless, irritable, and discontented. And I don't know how to. Do you ever catch yourself, and maybe when in your early sobriety, realizing you're angry and resentful and irritable, and say to yourself, "Okay, I'm not going to be that way anymore." How'd that work? Right? How'd that work? Yeah. Couldn't control my emotional nature. I can't just change like that. A prey to misery and depression. I like the word depression. More often in AA we use the word self-pity. I don't like the word self-pity. I like the word depression. Depression is the kind of word that if you suffered from depression and you drank again, the guys at the bar will go, "Of course you did. Let me buy you a drink. My God, you got clinical depression." They'll buy you a drink for that. They don't buy you nothing for self-pity. They'll give you medication for depression. They don't give you crap for self-pity. And it's such a sleazy, squirmy word. Do you ever have somebody come up sober when you're not doing well and say, "Bob, you're feeling sorry for yourself." For about a minute, you're not anymore, as you want to punch them, right? I hate that. Prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. 9 jobs, 4 years. It's funny how it's always their fault. We had a feeling of uselessness. Oh my God, that sense of in the 9th step promises. The wording is amazing, where it says that feeling of uselessness and self-pity. It will disappear. It doesn't say that feeling of uselessness and the feeling of self, like they're two separate things. They feed each other. They're connected. When you're useless, you're going to eventually feel sorry for yourself. Eventually. They're connected. That useless feeling I've had this most of my life, that feeling like, what's it all about, for God's sakes? What am I supposed to be when I grow up, if that's ever going to happen? And I live in a world, especially in AA, when I was new, old-timers, I had this love-hate relationship with most of them, and the love was, they were very kind to me and good to me, and I really appreciated that. And I wanted what they had, and yet resented them for having it. Do you know what I mean? The old-timers in AA looked as if they knew exactly who they were and exactly what they were about. Their life made sense. There was no spinning in their head as it is in mine, wondering, what do I do? Where do I go? Should I shop at Safeway, or maybe I should shop at Smith's or Lucky? I don't know. If I could figure out God's will, which one store I should go to, I'll probably get a better deal. And, crazy stuff. Right? They're not even concerned with that. They're just right as if they know exactly what their life's about, exactly who they are, because they do. They know that they're alcoholic. They've been given what is arguably, I think, the greatest blessing God would ever give His kids. This spiritual malady called alcoholism. I'll tell you why I think it's a blessing. Because without it, I would never be driven, shoved, and pushed into the life I have today. It is what has. It's a double-edged sword. It almost destroyed me and hurt a lot of people through me, and yet, with God's grace, it's the opposite. It's changed my life and helped a lot of people through me. Alcoholism really is, in God's hands, His greatest blessing. In my hands, bad deal. Bad deal. Feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. When it's all about me, and the world is all about me, there's a lot of crap to worry about. Man, I'm telling you. First of all, it's a planet full of people, and they're thinking something. And you don't know what it is, but you suspect it's about you. Or it might have to do with you, and you got to figure it out. I don't know if anybody else had this experience of getting sober and really just fighting the bottle, and feeling like you're eventually going to lose your mind. Like overwhelmed with such a degree of anxiety that I feel like my head's going to blow up. Full of fear. And this chased me well into sobriety. I rarely ever get this anymore unless I'm out of line somewhere and have something that needs to be corrected, which is sometimes fear. All this stuff is God's way of moving me. But in early sobriety, I used to wake up afraid. And I didn't even recognize it as fear. I would just wake up worrying about me. Wake up with an apprehension about what's going to be coming at me today. I was full of fear. We were unhappy. That's in Vision for You. It says that's why we drink again. It says he'll presently try the old game again. Why? Because he's not happy about his sobriety. And what happens to some of us is we go to meetings in AA, the discussion meetings, where everybody seems like they're doing well, so what do? We pretend. But as it talks about into action, sober, you can't survive living the double life. You can't survive putting out an image that everything's okay here and then going home and thinking about killing yourself. You can't survive that abyss between who you really are and who you want other people to think you are. You can't survive it. It's too much. God knows I know. Because I've been that guy in sobriety. The double life guy. Tough way to go. That is hell on earth. I remember my first year and a half of sobriety, I developed what what some would call a chronic gambling problem. I thought it was God was trying to make me rich and failing. But I would go out and gamble all my money and be broke, and I'm in debt, and I hate myself, and go to a meeting and put on my sober suit in the parking lot so I can go into the meeting and sound like a stellar example of AA. Tough way to go. I was unhappy. And it couldn't be of real help to other people, which connects back to the uselessness. The reason the people, the old-timers, are lit up is because they're helping others. There's a line in our book that says, an alcoholic properly armed with information about himself can be of use to another alcoholic where nobody else can. And these old-timers that I would see that are just lit up is because they're on fire. They got a purpose in their life that lights them up. Because even the worst things about them have become useful. There's nothing within them that is not right, that doesn't have a useful rightness about it. Even, some of you that are new here, the worst thing about you, the thing that you'll want to take to the grave, the thing you secretly have swept under the rug that you hate yourself for, you go through the steps, get involved in service, and I promise you, there'll come a day when you'll be delighted you had that experience. I'm telling you. Because you'll watch that experience turn another guy around. A guy that thought he was the only person on the planet that ever did that and was dying behind it. It's an amazing, amazing thing. Page 151 in the book, it says, we know a loneliness such as few do. And this is really the problem, is lack of unity. In Dr. Bob's last talk, he said a few things that he really encapsulated the essence and the spirit of the traditions in that talk. He talks about disunifying forces in AA. He talks about how we should never set ourselves apart as professionals. That we shouldn't even be concerned with the scientific stuff about the Freudian, your parents didn't treat you right, or all that self-analysis stuff. It's not our business. Our work here is to free ourselves of ourselves through helping other people and cleaning house. And he talks about gossip in there. He says the erring member and the tongue. I think that has the potential to be one of the most disunifying forces, not only in Alcoholics Anonymous, but in your family. Some of us were in families where nobody could talk to each other directly. So one member would talk to another member about you, right? And then that member talked to another member about you. And there's no connection, right? And then you don't feel like, and they're talking about you, so you don't want to be around them anymore. Or how many times in Alcoholics Anonymous that some guy will be out of line, maybe he has a gambling problem, or maybe he cheated on his wife, or maybe he's, I don't know, whatever the deal is, and it starts. And it's not kind stuff. It almost comes from a place of ego, as if the people talking about the person want to aggrandize themselves and feel like up here, looking down on that person. There is a line in our book. It says we do talk about each other quite a bit, but we always do it with the spirit of love and tolerance. Real tolerance. And Bill one time said in a letter, he said that honesty gets us to AA, but it is only tolerance that will keep us here. And real tolerance for some of us, guys like me, I didn't know what that was, and I started to learn it in step 4 as I went through the resentment section, and I started to change my perception of you by seeing myself in you and dismantling the judgment of you and realizing why am I mentally beating you up? That you're me. You're me on a bad day, but you're me. But maybe next week I really will be you. Right? It's the same thing that mechanics talk about when they talk about tolerances in engines. Your tolerance in an engine gets off, the engine will eventually blow up with friction because it's rubbing, the parts are rubbing each other, so they're irritating each other to a point of such kinetic energy the engine blows up. And so what a mechanic must do is take the engine apart, adjust the tolerances to allow the moving parts to move freely of each other so that there's no undue friction and enough kinetic energy to blow the engine up. And some of us know from a lack of tolerance, we blow up. Did you ever kick the dog because yesterday the cat scratched you? Right? That's the kind of guy I can be. I'm capable of all that. Capable of all of that. And this gossip thing in Alcoholics Anonymous is very brutal. I know a guy that left AA because of gossip. And it wasn't kind, and he had a situation in his family that was very painful for him. And there were people talking out the side of their neck about him, and he kept getting back to him. And sometimes well-meaning people in AA, because they're knuckleheads, don't realize what they're doing when they come to you and tell you what so-and-so said about you. That's not information you need. Right? And why are they telling that? Why are they telling you that? Because there's a sense of power in having the information. A sense it's self-grandizing. I got the good dope. Here's what happened. Did you know he said that about you? And you can almost feel them puffing up because they're the guy with the information. But it doesn't do any good. That does sometimes almost as much harm as the guy that's talking the crap. Right? And people leave here because of that. I pray to God that I would never do anything that would make people leave Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the great things about the traditions is they protect us from ourselves. Protect Alcoholics Anonymous from ourselves. Tradition number 2 really tells you who's in charge. For this, it's a funny. AA is a funny place. This is for a group purpose. There is but one ultimate authority. Only one. But one. There's only one. A loving God as He may express Himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. AA is the only place I know of where if a new guy comes, as most new guys come and do what I do, you want to find... I got my first sponsor because I thought he was in charge of AA. He was a past delegate, he was conference chairman, he sponsored a lot of guys. Because what do you do when you're new and you're awkward, you don't fit? You try to figure out who's got the juice, right? Who's in charge? And if a new guy tries to ask you, he comes to somebody and says, who's in charge? Well, God... Yeah, I know. Who's really in charge? God? No, come on. I mean, who runs the deal? Who's the top dog? Oh, the top dog. Well, the guy cleaning the bathroom? Not the speaker. No, the speaker. He's just so self-centered. We just let him stand up there and ramble about himself. The guy cleaning the bathroom? Because our leaders are but trusted servants. A is the only place on the planet where you come in a big shot and work your way up to servant. Everywhere else, the other way around. Everywhere else, you come in a servant, you sweep the floors, and maybe someday I'll be a vice president. AA, we all come in big shots. And if we're lucky, we work ourselves up to servant. Because our growth here is always about reduction. It's never about accumulation. It's always about reduction. The problem is I come here with too much of me. I got what Tebow used to say, ego reduction at depth. At depth. How do I access the boss? through the group conscience. What's the group conscience? Well, in business meetings, there's that aspect of it. But I don't know about you guys. I bet you on the square at least 1,000 times since I've been sober, God has talked to me through a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. At least 1,000 times. When I'm distraught and separate and apart from and confused and worried and scared, and I'll go to a meeting and there'll be somebody saying exactly. And you have exactly what I need to hear. And in order to access the ultimate authority, you have to stay a part of. You have to stay connected here in order to access God's grace. Because I don't know about you guys, when I'm in trouble, I can't access God directly. Wouldn't that be nice? Then I'd never need you. But I can't. I get too much of me between me and God. If you've ever tried to do meditation when you're nuts, don't have any sharp objects around, man. Oh, it's not good. I can't. I don't meditate. I think. And we're gonna break here in about 5 or 10 minutes. And the reason we're going to break is there's a spiritual principle that the mind can't absorb what the butt can't endure. So I want to say that to give some of you hope, with the ones that are looking at their watch. If I hear any more about the traditions, I'm going to hang myself. I know most of you can run to the beach in the break. It's a good chance, a good opportunity. Tradition number 3 really defines our membership requirements. In the original long form was very, very different than the short form. And this is my opinion, which doesn't mean anything really, but I suspect that AA took a hit when we went from the long form to the short form. And I don't know. That's only one perception. Another perception of the same thing is, we didn't take a hit. We broadened everything. Now we got all kinds of people in here. Anybody that just figures, anybody gets a DUI is welcome. Anybody that somebody says, you drink too much and they quit drinking, they can come to AA. But in the original membership requirement, in the long form, it said membership should include all who suffer from alcoholism. And then they eventually changed that to a desire not to drink. Well, I don't know. This is, in my mind, there's a big difference between suffering from alcoholism and having a desire not to drink. My sister could be a member of AA. She has a desire not to drink right now because she's trying to lose some weight. But if she could succeed in her desire, what she's given up is 1.5 glasses of wine occasionally. I mean, but she's got a sincere desire not to drink. But when she quits the 1.5 glasses of wine, she don't suffer from alcoholism. I am a member, an everyday member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because my alcoholism starts and becomes more painful where the bottle ends. That's why I need you. If that wasn't true, why would I come here? Maybe for social reasons, I suppose. AA could be like the sober Elks. But I ain't right. When I'm not drinking, I ain't right. When the medicine don't work no more, I ain't right. And that's why I need Alcoholics Anonymous. I suffer from alcoholism. I'm the guy who can't quit entirely because of it. It talks about on page 44. I am not the hard problem drinker. I'm the real alcoholic. But the Spirit, it goes on to talk about this open door spirit. Hence we may refuse none who wish to recover from alcoholism. We have a thing that's in contention today at times in Alcoholics Anonymous, the singleness of purpose. And I've sat in meetings where it's debated, and I sense that we miss the point. That singleness of purpose is not designed to exclude anyone per se. Because anyone who wants to call themselves an alcoholic, even if they're not, has a right to be here. I mean, there's no police. I mean, a couple guys in black uniforms don't come to your apartment in the middle of the night to give you a blood test to see if you're really alcoholic. I mean, you want to say you're alcoholic. But it's an encouragement for a couple things to keep the real alcoholics here. And what happens is if you go to a group that is dominated by people other than alcoholics, and their discussions might be about drugs primarily, which is a lot of alcoholics have that experience in their stories. That doesn't mean that they have alcoholism, but they're alcoholic. You can be alcoholic and a lot of stuff. You can be alcoholic and choke little baby chickens' necks. It doesn't matter. Do you have alcoholism? But if you go to groups where consistently they're talking about their chocolate cake problem or their gambling problem, or there was a couple of years ago, I could have dominated 20 minutes of a meeting with my anxiety over and my addiction to the stock market. And what happens if you go to meetings like that? You don't want to go anymore. I mean, it's useful and it's kind of intellectually stimulating. Oh, I didn't know anything about the stock market until I went to that meeting. Wow, that's really cool. It's time for that meeting again. Boy, there's something really good on TV. I lose my desire to go because it doesn't feed me. We always want, the common welfare should always come first. I want Alcoholics Anonymous to always feed me and feed my spirit. And everybody in this room, I bet you everybody in this room has gone to meetings that lit you up and gone to meetings that when you came out of the meeting, you needed a meeting. Right? Everybody has that experience. And do you ever try to look at the difference between the two? It usually has something to do with the traditions. Usually. Let's take a 12-minute and 37-second break. I'll reiterate an announcement that was made by Chuck at the very beginning about the cell phones. And I want to tell you something. Especially if you're new, you probably don't get this. We're not trying to tell you what to do. We've been here a long time, and we know how God works. God has a bizarre sense of humor. If you leave your cell phone on, you can bet He will have some knucklehead call you in the middle of the meeting. Everybody around you would turn and look at you, and you will not hear anything else the rest of the meeting because you're having conversations in your head with the people that looked at you. So just save yourself a lot of grief and shut it off. I mean, but do what you want. But if it goes off and you miss a big chunk of the meeting, it's not our fault. I want to talk a little bit about this unifying force of gossip in AA. I know from taking my own inventory why I gossip is to try to elevate myself because I don't really feel that good about myself. Do you ever notice when you're really okay with yourself, what other people are doing it's nothing. It's nothing. But on a bad spiritual hair day, that's when the noticer comes on. I was up in I lived up in Maine for a while. It was one of my better geographics. I was up there, and I had a job for a while working on a lobster boat as a stern man. It was a tough, hard way to make a living, but fun, interesting. And we used to pull traps, lobster traps. And my first day on this lobster boat, we're pulling these traps, and there's crabs in the traps, which is not uncommon. And the lobster guys don't want the crabs. So they got this big bucket on the deck of the ship. It's about this high, about this big around, and they just throw the crabs, pull them out of the traps, just throw them the crabs, and they set the lobsters aside. Well, I'm standing there, and I'm looking at this crab bucket, and it's got several hundred crabs in it. They're just about to overflow, and they're climbing out, and they're going to, any minute, in about a minute, they're going to be all over the deck. And I'm a little concerned about this, because, well, first, they're a little creepy, the way, and so I tell this guy that on the boat, I said, you got to put a lid on that. He goes, no, we don't. I said, they're going to get out. He says, no, they won't. I said, look, right there. They're just about, that guy's just about ready to cut over the top. He said, no, they won't. He says, watch. And sure enough, just when a crab was about to break out, the other ones couldn't stand it. They'd reach up and they'd pull him down. He said, we never have to cover that. And sometimes a group in Alcoholics Anonymous that is permeated with a lot of untreated alcoholism is very much like a crab bucket. We'll just keep pulling each other down, pulling each other down. It's one of the most disunifying forces in Alcoholics Anonymous. Tradition 4, this is really where the traditions get interesting. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. Now, in the long form, it gets very specific about the trustees and etc. But in the spirit, and I'm more into the spirit of the traditions. The application of them within the fellowship is essential to our survival. But I am one who believes if you get the spirit of something, the application is very simple and it's like it's automatic. This is the tradition where the principle from Shakespeare that is on our coins, to thine own self be true, meets and merges with the other-centeredness of consideration. Autonomy in Alcoholics Anonymous brings us much freedom, and freedom brings much responsibility. Freedom without responsibility is kind of self-will run riot. Because with the freedom, there should be a consciousness of how our actions affect others. I think that one of the things that happens in most of us as we progress along, grow along spiritual lines, is we start to think outside the box of ourselves. In other words, how does my behavior, what does it speak to the newer people? Everything I do in Alcoholics Anonymous is essentially my vote for how I think everybody should conduct themselves. And you only get one vote. And it's not what you say, it's really your actions. If I want to cross-talk in a meeting or gossip with the guy next to me while someone's sharing in a meeting, then aren't I really saying that I think everybody should do that? Now, the inherent thing in alcoholics of my type is we think we're above the rules. I think the rules should apply for you. But essentially, if equanimity is here, if we are a program of equals, and we all have equal rights here, then what I do is really my vote for how I think people should conduct themselves in Alcoholics Anonymous. If I don't put any money in the basket, aren't I really saying I don't think anybody should? Maybe AA should dissolve. If I come late to a meeting and sort of disruptive as I come in, aren't I really saying I think everybody should be late for meetings? And I think as my consciousness starts to expand, as I start to get it, there's no punitive measures in Alcoholics Anonymous. There is spiritual growth, and as I grow spiritually, I grow away and outside and above myself. I start to wake up to what are my actions speaking here. And I'll tell you something. You think you start waking up to that, you start changing some of your behavior, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I have changed stuff in my life that I got to tell you, I would have never changed if it was just me. But I came I came to the table in step 6 with a willingness because I didn't want to be a bad example. Isn't that weird that in some sense, I love you more than I love me. I care about you more than I care about me. Now that sounds crazy, doesn't it? But if you're like me and if I step back from myself, it's evidenced throughout my whole life. If I have one of the guys I sponsor, or some guy in my home group has got some little physical problem, he's not sure what it is, I will be the first to step up and suggest he go to the doctors. I'll even get up and take you. If it was me, well, isn't that evidence that I care more about you than I care about me? And this is the only place on the planet where my deficiencies and shortcomings have become useful. I have grown in some areas of my life simply because I so much loved you. And how could you not? How could you not stay in AA for a number of years and have the transformation that comes into your life as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then sponsor guys, and then you get the privilege of having a ringside seat to watch the hand of AA or the hand of God who works through AA change their lives? I had dinner with my sister and my daughter the other night, and we're all going on a trip to Cozumel. My sister's we're going to get her. My daughter and I we're working on her, trying to get her certified to go scuba diving. She's a little resistant to it. She saw the movie Jaws 3 times. But we're working on her, and if nothing else, she's going to come down there and lay on the beach with us. And I can almost not talk about this without crying. I have this relationship with my daughter and my sister that is unbelievable. And it came from Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, how could I not love AA for what it has done? I'm the guy that was dying of loneliness, and I'm connected to people. How could I not love Alcoholics Anonymous? I'd have to be an idiot to not love AA for what it's done, not only in my life, but in the lives of the people that I love. My daughter's never seen me drunk. She loves me. That's you. That's you. That's not me. Are you kidding me? That's not me. I watch guys in AA start to take credit for their lives. Dangerous proposition. The ego clamors for that all the time. I'm probably going to screw this up trying to quote it, but I heard Tom one time talk about what he does in the morning, and he said he'll probably talk about this later. I'll probably screw it up. About being cognizant of the gift that he's been given, and then trying to align himself as a guy worthy of receiving the gift and acting accordingly in his life. Something like that. That's not exactly what he said, but we all we hear things in AA and then put them on and wear it the way it. That's why what I hear and what is said, probably not the same thing. That's why in AA we have a book, as Bill sees it, now and on they say Lois remembers. Well, yeah. You should be a fly on the wall when my sister and I talk about our childhood. You'd think we came from 2 separate families. Because I get stuff and then I tweak it. Now that's not dishonest, that's creative. And that's second nature to me. And that's why I'm suspect of a lot of things I think, and I am, because if you know me the way I know me, you'd be suspect of what I think and perceive of my life also. I've had just so overwhelmed by evidence of how I do that. Tradition number 5 is really the core of Alcoholics Anonymous. It talks about our primary. Number 1, first and foremost purpose is, and I'll read it, it says, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. In the long form, it refers to an AA group as a spiritual entity. I love that. It really is. Did you ever walk into your home group when there's nobody there except you? And then close your eyes and sit there and try to feel what's there? And then close your eyes and sit there when we're all here? There's something is in the mix here. And I think that's the covenant here, that when two or more of us come together for the purpose of recovery, God will be in the mix. He's in the midst. And there is an entity. It's almost as if in an AA group, especially if it's a group grounded in the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, where the sum is greater than the parts. There is something in a room. I heard Bob say it last weekend. We were together in Nashville. He called it the collective consciousness. And it really, there's something, maybe it's multiple. It's such a multiple concentration of manifestations of God that it becomes an entity unto itself. But you can feel it. Do you ever just sit? I loved it in big meetings or in conventions. Just sit and close your eyes, and just try to clear yourself and feel what's there. Especially right before the meeting, when or during the coffee break, when you instantly there's 300 conversations jump started with the word "I." Just right. Our primary purpose. My business went through some bumps in the road and got sick because we lost our primary purpose for a while. And our primary purpose was being of service. And it started to become us. And the spirit of the business became sick. Families do the same thing when the individual becomes more important than the whole. I got sick in my sobriety. I was a guy who I'd been diagnosed as clinically depressed before I got sober, in the years I was in and out, by some competent psychiatrists, and I wasn't really clinically depressed. And I'll tell you how. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'll tell you how I know that. Because I diligently applied the medication and treatment for clinical depression, I didn't get any better. It wasn't until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and applied the treatment for spiritual depression that I started to get better and I started to get free. The problem, it looked exactly like clinical depression, but it really was the depression of a spirit and a being that is being smothered by himself. Right? I just had so much of me on me that it was as if the very oxygen hose to my being had been crimped. And I was suffering from that. And I got sober and I battled with that, and 12-step work saved me from that continually. I eventually started working the steps, and I was free from it. I mean, free from it. And when I was 19 years sober, it came back. And this is crazy. It came back in a time in my life where I had everything I ever wanted. I was making much more money than I make today, that I have today. I ran out of things to buy. I mean, the only thing left would have been a Gulf Stream or something, or a Lear. I mean, I had like 3 very expensive, fancy cars and 2 motorcycles and 30-some pair of custom cowboy boots and all kinds of jewelry, and I had enough money in my bank account at that point that I could have retired. I never worried about money. I remember I came home from a trip to Maui where I stayed at this beautiful hotel on the beach in Wailea and rented a Harley and rode around the island, went to gourmet restaurants. It was a wonderful trip. And I came home and I'm sitting in my house. It's a very nice house. It has a view of the city of Las Vegas sits up high, and I'm sitting there and I'm depressed. and I can't shake it. And it's crazy because I have everything. And I don't know about you guys, when I feel weird, I always want to hang it on something. You know, like somewhere I didn't get my way or something. And I had everything. And I'm sinking into this deep depression. And it's bad. And it's the first time I'd had this for years since I was, new in sobriety. And I didn't know what to do. And I went to a meeting one night. And I'm telling this friend of mine about it. And I felt awful. It's that kind of depression where you can't even hear in meetings because you're so self-consumed, right? And I managed to get to this meeting, and I'm telling this friend of mine, and here's what he said to me. He said, well, you go to meetings and you sponsor guys and you run your mouth a lot in AA. And he says, but I don't think your primary purpose is helping other alcoholics anymore. He said to me, I think your primary purpose is you. They say the truth will set you free. It'll ruin your day first. I'm telling you. Because he's right. It hurt, but he was right. So somehow the purpose of my life had become my toys and my business and my finances and my sex life and what you think of me and how many sponsees I have and how many toys. It had become me. And here's the sad part and the frightening part. I didn't even know that had happened. Honest to God, I didn't even know it had happened. You don't go from a guy who's lit up helping drunks to a guy who's consumed with himself overnight, I think. I think it's a small incremental shifts back into the center of the universe again. And I didn't even know that happened. And some of us know that no matter how good you get it out here, if it ain't no good in here, I'm telling you, it ain't no good. And I was dying. And within a week, I got a couple knuckleheads, new guys in my car, and I'm lit up again. And I've never been back in that place since then. Because I'd walked slowly, incrementally away from my primary purpose. And this is just speculation based on my experience, but I think if you're an alcoholic of my type, you're compelled. You don't have a choice. You're compelled to serve something. And you're either going to serve yourself, or you're going to serve an ethic and a principle and a purpose, and ultimately behind the curtain of power greater than yourself, or you're going to serve yourself, but you're going to serve something. And most of us have spent our lives serving ourselves. And there's only one question you ever have to ask yourself with that. How'd that work? Right? Victims of a delusion that I can wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world by managing well. Serving myself. And I think that we lose a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been going to a detox. This one particular detox, they've been open probably 24, 25 years, and I've been going there average twice a week to take a meeting in there. I love going down there. It's my personal relapse prevention plan. It's a great thing, and we see the things. I see things there that some of you will never see. I see the guys from Florida and the Carolinas and Maine and New York and California that drank with 20 years of sobriety. They end up on the streets. Las Vegas calls you. We call Vegas the hitting bottom capital of the world. It calls you. And they end up often in our detox. And you can ask them a lot. There's a lot of myths in AA. Myths like, well, people that drink again stop going to meetings. That's not always true. I know guys that went to 2 meetings one day and drank that night. Or they stopped praying. That's not true. I sponsored a man of the cloth who drank himself to death, begging God not to let him drink. What is the one common denominator? And I ask people, I tell you, I've done a study, a personal study just through observation because I don't ever want to drink again. I have never to this date found anybody that ended up in our detox with after 10 years of sobriety or 20 years or whatever, when you ask them the question of how many new guys were they working with the month before they drank again, how many guys were they trying to help with the steps, how much 12-step work or service were they doing? It's usually zero. It's usually zero. They're praying, they're going to meetings, but their life becomes all about them. Right? And to this day, I have never once been in detox with some guy and said, would you do me a favor? I don't have a phone here. Here's these 3 new guys I'm working with. Would you call them, tell them I slipped? I've never had that experience. Never had that experience. And never will. It's when it says in the beginning of working with others that nothing so much ensures immunity to drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It's our primary number one above everything purpose. And what a glorious purpose it is. You don't know that till you've claimed it. Nothing in AA makes sense until you claim it. Nothing. There's never, I have never seen in the years I've been here, never seen one person ever come to Alcoholics Anonymous suffering from the loneliness and separation and depression and anxiety and remorse of untreated alcoholism that has ever sat in the room, looked at the 12 steps and went, oh yeah, that would work. Of untreated alcoholism that has ever sat in the room, looked at the 12 steps and went, oh yeah, that would work. Nobody says that. Occasional Al-Anon will say it for him. But no alcoholics ever said that. No alcoholics ever said that. Until what happens is out of desperation, I love there's a line in the 12 by 12 says we come to this by circumstance rather than by virtue. That out of desperation and a lack of alternatives, I start doing some of this stuff. And then what happens? Universal experience. Then everybody works steps. We all say the same thing. Oh, should have done that years ago. But you don't know that until after you do it. Until after you do it is our primary purpose. As a matter of fact, I believe that all the 12 steps are to serve that end. That's why step 12 is last. Matter of fact, as you go through the process in the book, it talks about things like our real purpose is to fit, and sometimes because our ego is always clamoring, and to refit, to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That's the deal. This is not, Alcoholics Anonymous is not a self-serving program. And I thought it was. I want to come in here. Oh yeah, the meditation, I want to hone myself to such a state of spiritual perfection that I kind of rise above everybody, No. At the very best is I'm restored to a sense of one with and community and usefulness. Usefulness. That I can experience the juice of having something that I didn't even believe in when I got here work through me. What a sweetness that is. I know some of you have had that. Some of you had the experience talking to some new guy. It's an out-of-body experience. You hear yourself saying things to a new guy that you don't even know you know. Where's that coming from? What a sweet experience that is. I've walked away from those going, oh, I feel like I've been loved. I feel like he's been loved all through me. What a sweet experience that is. So you don't want to miss that. Tradition number 6 An AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our number one, our primary purpose. In the long form, it also uses the word authority. Money, property, and authority. What else would divert you? The only thing I could add to that would be relationships. Money, property, prestige, authority, and relationships divert us from our primary purpose. What is it all? Isn't it all clamoring? It's all clamoring of self. Because whose money do you think they're talking about? My money. My prestige. My authority. It's all about me. It is the clamorings of self and things that self attaches itself to that will divert me from my primary purpose of helping others. And consequently, it's what will divert a family from its primary purpose, a business, or a group. And I think that before anything dies, whether it's a business, a family, or an AA group, the spirit of it gets sick first. And how does it get sick? It gets inundated by self, by ego. And I am absolutely convinced that what happens and is true for the whole is also happens and is true for the individual. You know, my journey into extinction spiritually is no different than the journey of an AA group into extinction, or a business or a company into extinction. It's the same thing. I get so wrapped up in me, playing God again, doing all that stuff, running the show, and the cons. There's an interesting line in our book. It says that when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. If that's true, then it would be reasonable to assume that the opposite was true, the reverse. So if I get sick of spirit and disconnected and full of myself, wouldn't it make perfect sense that I start to get my thinking gets a little wacky? Yet you don't know it. I've never had wacky thinking where in the middle of it I thought, oh, that's wacky thinking. No, that's not wacky thinking. I think it's right? That's why I got a sponsor. I check stuff out. I got a sponsor and a couple spiritual advisors that are in this room. I bounce stuff. Because one of the greatest things I have going for me is I don't trust this. And I don't trust it enough to check with people and talk to people and try to be transparent about what's going on in my life. Fungus only grows in the dark. What? Tradition numbers. Oh, and oddly, and something I want to touch on this too in the short form. This is really this is good for my consciousness. It says, "Wow, this is the short form. This is the long form of the sixth tradition. It talks about dividing the material from the spiritual. And it talks in here about hospitals and AA clubs, and this is particular, that they should never use the AA name, and they must be separate and set apart, so that if the groups don't like what's going on, they can discard them and jettison them. That it is not Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you a sad thing that's happened, and recurs in my area, is we have a lot of clubs and not a lot of groups. And we have some AA clubs that have gone out of business over the years because they were started by members of AA for profit, as if they're gonna make a living off the fellowship, right? And what happens is those places get sick and they eventually just stop existing. And this is so pathetic. There was a place called the Kiss Club in Las Vegas that was owned by a guy, and he had the pool tables and the food, and he tried to make a living off of it. And when it dissolved, there were people that went to meetings there, and that's the only place that they went to meetings, that thought AA disappeared. That wasn't AA. Now, there were AA groups that met there, and some of them, they took the treasury and they give it to the club. I mean, they don't even get it. That's not an AA group. We must always. We got a group in Las Vegas right now that there's a lot of. It's not a group. It's a club. They act like a group. That was started by a guy who was all over the press as one of the leaders of this Nazi Aryan Brotherhood thing, and he's thrown at some ethnic. He's asked some ethnic people to leave the facility. Well, I'll tell you, anybody I know don't go there. And the sad part, this is what chaps me a lot. And I'll tell you, I'll get more offended if you hurt AA. You can hurt me, don't hurt AA. I get up in arms, man. Is that there are new guys that go there that they think that's AA. That's what really chaps me. And I am absolutely convinced the spirit of that place is so sick that it won't exist in another year. But in the meantime, it reflects very badly on us. Very badly on us. And further on, towards the end of this tradition of the longed for, it says something that's very important to me. It says, while an AA group may cooperate with anyone, matter of fact, it's almost as encouraging. We can cooperate. We can be helpful. And we do. We cooperate with the prison systems. You know, I've seen AA members get up in arms because of the prison system try to tell them what to do. Hey, it's their prison, for God's sake. We're the only people I ever met on the planet that can show up somewhere and have a better way for people to do things. I mean, you know, that's crazy. We're guests there. But so we cooperate with them. Don't wear blue jeans. Yes, sir. Don't wear khakis because it's a federal place. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Don't talk about this. Got it. Got it. It said that we can cooperate with anyone. Such cooperation ought never go so far as affiliation or endorsement. We can, in a helpful spirit, we can cooperate with anyone. But we don't align ourselves. And here's the part that's the kicker to me. It should never go so far as affiliation or endorsement, actual or implied. Now, that broadens that up a lot. So in other words, I got to step back from my behavior and look at it and ask myself, and the behavior of groups, I think healthy groups do this. Does anything that we do, would it even imply affiliation or endorsement? In other words, how do we look to the newer people? What are we saying to them? Are we saying that Alcoholics Anonymous is a Christian organization? Are we saying that Alcoholics Anonymous believes in medication or believes in not taking medication? What are we speaking that looks like we're behind some issue, that we're affiliating or endorsing some cause? We don't do any of that in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you, in this spirit, I've looked at some things I've shared in meetings and some stuff, and I thought, you know, that implied. What if there was somebody in the room and I was the only, it's the first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm the only example that to this day they have ever seen of AA. Now, they don't know that I don't really speak for AA. In their mind, they don't know that. And I just said something that makes AA look like it's a certain way that it's not. And I tell you, I've done that stuff. And not consciously, not out of malice. I never did it out of malice. I did it because I'm a knucklehead. Right? And I don't know. I just don't know. Tradition number 8. This is a weird deal. 7. I think I wanted to skip that subconsciously. Yeah. Financial integrity is tradition number 7. Well, it gets into an area that's a little touchy. Each AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining their outside contributions. I got jumped by an old-timer in AA when I was new at a meeting at one of the clubs. He saw me go and buy a pack of cigarettes, and then I didn't put any money in the basket. And he embarrassed me in front of the whole room. Now, maybe his method of approach to me was a little adamant and could have been softer, but what he was saying was right. Is that I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I was remaining a taker. And you know what I had to start looking at? If I come to an AA meeting and I drink 4 cups of coffee and put $1 in the basket, I'm a taker here. Where do you get 4 cups of coffee for $1? All right? I think the standard in AA was always the price of a drink. Now, I know some of you haven't been in bars for a long time. We wouldn't believe what you'll pay for a cocktail today. You get a Grey Goose martini, it's like $7, $8, $10. An average drink is probably $5. And I put $5 in the basket in my home group, and I'll put a minimum of $2 in the basket at any other meeting I ever go to. A minimum. And that's objectively, I got to tell you, objectively, that's probably short. Objectively. If I am really going to buy the principle of self-supporting, in other words, that I want to contribute here. Now, and I got to say this, if you're sitting here and you're broke, that's a whole nother deal here. Matter of fact, I was at an AA group one time. They told the new people, if you can put some money in the basket, put it in. If you don't have any, take $1 out. And I watched, nobody took $1 out. Now, there's groups I go to where the basket would be empty by the time it got. But this was not a Skid Row group like where I go. I mean, there's homeless people in some of the meetings I go to that just grab a handful. I mean, but if you're sitting here and you don't have, or if you're in a AA meeting and you don't have any money, that's a whole different deal. We're not asking you. We're not. The seventh tradition is not designed to embarrass anybody, really and truly. But if you got $50 in your pocket and you've had 5 cups of coffee and you put $1 in the basket, I mean, don't take my word for it. Step back objectively and look at what you just did. If you can, in your own mind, think you're pulling your weight here, then I'd like to have your phone number from time to time. I got things that I think your thinking would probably justify things in my life. I mean, this spiritual principle of being self-supporting when I first got sober, I thought step 1 was get a job. They were big on that, get a job. When I was almost a year sober, I'd lost a job, and I had a hard time for a while getting another one. And I was eligible for $120 a week unemployment. And people in AA, the only job I could get paid minimum wage, which the take home was like $90-some, and people in AA pushed me to take the job where I was going to end up with $97 rather than the $120 for doing nothing. I'm thinking, these guys don't know math. 97 and 120, 40 hours, nothing. I mean, that's crazy. And yet they were absolutely right. I'd have died taking that free money and not working. It would have killed me. I think my integrity, and also in groups, the integrity of Alcoholics Anonymous is that we stand up. We stand up. And so many of us have been takers all our lives. We let our families support us. Some of us have taken money from the government, sometimes under false. I can't tell you how many 8-step lists I've seen where they took money from the government under false pretenses. This is where we stop it. Let me stop it. Financial integrity. Tradition number 8. This is very different in the long form than the short form. The short form is very brief. And, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. What's that mean? Clerical workers, for the most part. I know if you've ever been to the General Service Office in New York City, they have quite a payroll. But it's not, none of those people are getting paid for 12-step work. At least I hope not. I don't think they are. They're getting paid for clerical office work, the same kind of work that you would hire a temp from a secretarial service to do. Filing, correspondence, phone stuff. But in the long form, it says Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional. We define professionalism as the occupation of counseling alcoholics for fees or higher. But we may employ alcoholics where they are going to perform those services for which we might otherwise have to engage non-alcoholics. Such special services may be well recompensed, and central office workers, clerical stuff. But our usual AA 12-step work is never to be paid for. If you break this tradition, the punitive thing is not within the fellowship, it comes from the spirit of the universe. I'll tell you something, I've watched over the years guys try to profit off of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they get away with it for a number of years, but I'll tell you, I've never seen it turn out well. Whether it's guys get dollar bills in their eyes and they buy some dump abandoned house and stick 30 newcomers in it at $500 a week, or a month or whatever, trying to get rich, or I'm just curious. Besides myself, and I worked as a counselor in my first year of sobriety. How many other people in here have either worked as a counselor or at least thought about it at one time that that's what they'd like to do, is become an alcoholism counselor? Do you know that statistically the highest relapse rate is in alcoholism counselor? You have a better shot staying sober as a drug dealer than as an alcoholism counselor. And yet that's the first job we all want. Because, you go to AA meetings and they're hammering you. You got to help people. And if you're self-centered and have a mind like mine, it's like, well, how can I benefit me from that? How can I get paid to do that? And I worked... And some people are able to do that very well, and they call them two-hatters, and one doesn't bleed into the other. But here's what happened to me when I did it. Within no time at all as working as a professional in the field, I started to become unsponsorable. I became the I know guy because I was taking a professional stance towards my own recovery. And also because I worked 10 hours a day in this rehab, when I got off work, I didn't feel like doing 12-step work. I didn't feel like spending time with some new guy. I didn't feel like going into a hospital or an institution. I'd still make myself because I was under pressure, but I didn't feel like it. And what was happening is I'm cutting off the flow of power in my life. I was up in the Rocky Mountains years ago, and these guys took me to see this little lake that was so clean and clear and pristine, you could see the rocks on the bottom of the lake. And the reason it was so pure and clean is on one side of the lake, there's a stream with water rapidly moving in. On the other side, there's water moving out. It never got stagnant. When I worked as a professional in the field of alcoholism, I became unsponsorable. I blocked the stuff coming in, and I did it for a living, and I blocked the stuff going out. And I started to get stagnant. I didn't even know that. The few individuals that have worked in the field of professionally and have survived it and done well remain very humble and sponsorable. And they will get off work and go and do into a different institution where they don't get paid, and they'll volunteer their time, or they'll put a meeting on, or they'll listen to a fifth step, and they're very, very present and active in their primary purpose. And they're able to separate the two and not listen to the clamorings in their head as, well, I don't need to do that. I do it all day long. They never listen. They never indulge that. They're able to keep it separate. I wasn't one of those guys. It bled into each other with me. God took that job away from me. I don't think I would have stayed sober if I'd have stayed there, because I was cutting off the two channels, the channel within and the channel out. Tradition number 9 in the short form is, AA as such ought never be organized. I have never found us in much danger of breaking this. I don't. I know it's in the long form. It gets very, it gets very specific about the grapevine and the general service office, et cetera, et cetera. And but from a spiritual point of view, I don't think we're going to get over-organized. You ever try to get 20 members of your home group to go out to dinner together? Oh, man. You need an Al-Anon in the midst to kind of get it all rolling. Because alcoholics we all have 20 different ideas of where we should eat. And if we go with anybody else's idea, you'll sit there and have a resentment, right? It's like trying to herd mosquitoes, it's just... We're not organized, but we are responsible. And responsible is a word, just the word responsibility used to make me guilty. That's a word I didn't like, and it's such a simple word because it's just the ability to respond. They need a coffee maker. Step up. Respond. You got new guys walking in. Stick your hand out. Respond. I think implied in this, where even though we're not organized, and we shouldn't be, we're very unorganized actually, we are a fellowship of lit up, good-hearted people behind a primary purpose, and we respond. You get a good AA group. A really good AA group, they don't have to be beating the bushes for people to do commitments. Matter of fact, there's usually people stand in line in a good AA group. Everybody wants to serve because they get it. They get it. They get that's where the goods are. That's where one of the guys I sponsor talks about service and 12-step work. He says, "That's the good dope." Yeah. Tradition number 10. No AA group or member should ever in such a way as implicate AA express any opinion on outside controversial issues, particularly those of politics, alcohol reform, or sectarian religion. The Alcoholics Anonymous group should oppose no one. Considering such members, they express no view whatever. Very different than the short form. Because in the short form, it's talking about groups. Here it says, or member. This is the tradition that I am the most deficient of. This is the one I struggle the most with. I have a lot of opinions. Matter of fact, I'll tell you something. It's hideous, but you can measure my distance from God. You can measure my distance from others. You can measure my distance from my own surrender by how many opinions are in my life. And God, if I could personally, as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, become opinionless, I think I would finally have gotten to a place where I've actually carried out the decision in step 3. Because what is my will? When I'm saying to God, and I'm coming from the intention of turning my will first of all, and then my life. What is my will? It's my view. It's my way. It's my opinions of how things should be, how things shouldn't be. And I incur personally, when I have a lot of opinions, I incur the anxiety of my opinion of how things should be isn't going to be done. The anxiety of not getting my way, or the depression. You know what depression is? That's when God stops doing your will. I'm one of those kind of guys, drunk or sober. I can be crushed. There's a line in our book that says we're crushed by self-imposed crises we cannot postpone or evade. And then we have to fearlessly face the proposition God's either everything or He's nothing, either is or He isn't. But you can come out of a place like that where God's everything. He is, and I am nothing, and I'm surrendered. And what's the first thing you get back? Your opinion. Some of you may have had this experience. Walking into your home group, or maybe into work, maybe somewhere, maybe going home, walking into the house where there's kids and stuff running around. Walking in there, surrendered. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. God's in His heaven. Everything is in divine order. And then you sit down, and it's the weirdest thing happens. It's like a key turns in my head. I'll just start noticing things. You know what I mean? It's just this, and I don't notice. If you're like me, this is terrible. I don't notice good stuff. I notice out of line stuff. I notice where people are wrong. I notice, right? And then what happens is that I've joined the ranks of the unsurrendered. There's separation once again between me and you and me and God, because if I'm not happy with you, you're God's first gift to me. I'm not happy with God if I'm not happy with you. Isn't it odd in AA that we get closer to God not by getting closer to God, we get closer to God by getting closer to people? In the fifth step is where it promises the nearness of our Creator. When? After I started to clear away everything between me and God. Or between me and you, rather. And as I clear things away between me and you, what happens is I end up closer to God. Cause and effect. Because you are my first expression of God I ever see is you. The Hindus tell a story of creation that I found fascinating. I love it. It's called Maya. And it stands for the Great Illusion. And their story of creation is that God existed timelessly unto Himself. And He devised this cosmic game. And the cosmic game was He would break Himself into an infinite number of parts, give all the parts costumes, skin suits, and give all the parts amnesia. And the game is which parts are going to realize and see through the illusion and realize that they're not separate. They are one with each other and one with God. The Hindus call that enlightenment. We call it a spiritual awakening. I think one of the reasons that we become effective here is that we get it. I see the me that is in you. I see through the illusion that Einstein talked about when he said the great illusion of mankind was that there was more than one of us here. And boy, you sponsor people, you get that after a while. You listen to fifth step after fifth step, it's the same guy. I haven't heard anything new in a fifth step in 28 years. I'm hopeful. I hear him periodically. I'm always hopeful. Somebody's going to come up with something interesting, Visqueen, a vibrating lawn rake, chunky peanut butter, something exciting, interesting. But it's never like that. It's always the same pathetic, scared, inadequate guy, desperately, frantically trying to fill his vacancies and failing and stepping on the toes of everybody around him and causing a mess in the process. It's always the same. Matter of fact, the commonality in it is that we could write the first 10 people on your inventory for you. We know who they are. Mother, father, sister, brother, first, the couple big bosses, every relationship that ever... I mean, it's all the same. I mean... Yeah. Where am I? $11. Oh, I'm getting there. This is tedious, isn't it? Yeah, I know. All right, we're almost done. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We're more promoters than attractors. This is really a big deal. Bill Wilson, I love Bill Wilson. He was a promoter by nature, yet hampered by spiritual principles. And consequently, he was often really an amazing program of attraction. But his nature was promotion. His nature. And only God does that. Only God does that. Our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need to always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. Within the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I give my last name. And I tell you, my name's Bob Darrell. I am alcoholic. And my phone number is in the Las Vegas directory. And I do that in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous because I've been taught to step up here and be available. That if I were to share something this weekend that would touch someone in a way that you needed to talk to me and maybe you were too afraid to approach me this weekend, that a week later, as it's cooked and simmered in you, that you could find me. I want you to be able to find me. I want to be available. That is my primary purpose. And God chooses all that. You know, you can't pick who you're going to help. I mean, if I could pick who I would help, I'd have a lot more respectable sponsees than I got, I'll tell you. I'd have some captains of industry and some movie stars. I get knuckleheads like me. You don't pick. We serve. Service without prejudice. And yet at the same time, I am very, very protective of my anonymity at public level. I was approached many years ago by someone in the media. I suspect someone in AA dimed me out and went to this person and told him some of my story. And they found it fascinating that a guy that had been homeless, a wino on the streets, could at one time, I owned the largest chain of retail liquor stores in the state of Nevada. And they found that would be good copy. Very human interest, great human interest story. And they came to me and they wanted to do a story on it. And I absolutely refused. And they even offered not to print my last name. Well, they're going to know who it is, for God's sakes. Right? Who are you kidding me? And they couldn't understand why I would. They kept saying, but it'll be good for your business. It'd kill me. Because it would set me as separate and apart from. It would feed something in me that should be starved. And it would starve something in me that should be fed. I must remain a part of the herd. I can't be... And I'll tell you something. I think standing up here doing this is a dangerous proposition. It scares me. And I have a network of guys I talk to about this kind of stuff. Bob and I have talked about this. Tom and I have talked about. Tom wrote an amazing. I think he wrote it. It was anonymous, but I saw this thing. I was sure he wrote it. And it was about a circuit rider. Was that you that wrote that? He won't see. He's too humble to say. I'd have been signing autographs if it was me. No, I think he wrote it, but it's a dangerous proposition. And how do guys like me survive it? I'm sponsored. I go into the trenches several times a week. I go to meetings. The heart of my program recovery is I go to meetings where nobody knows I'm some kind of big shot speaker. I'm just an annoying guy from AA to them, where they really would rather be taking a nap. You know what I mean? And I'm nothing special down there. And I'm the guy who brings in the meeting a couple times a week. I do enough of that kind of stuff. I hope to God that it balances out what I do up here. Because if I just did this, I am absolutely convinced I would die of alcoholism. I heard Cliff R., who's a dear friend, and he just had a great turnaround physically. We were all really concerned. He's got a little temporary new lease physically. He's doing very well. But Cliff, one time at a meeting, at a conference, I heard him get up to the podium, and he talked about the guys he sponsors and the commitments he has and the things he does in the trenches and the service things. And then he said something. I wanted to cheer when he said it. He says, I don't think we should allow people to get up here and do this unless they're doing that. Because we'll kill them. It won't hurt Alcoholics Anonymous, but it'll kill a guy like me. This is very... First of all, you tell me, you finally beat it into my head that my problem's self-centered. Now you want me to get up to a podium and capture a whole room while I talk about me? What's wrong with that picture? You know, there's something a little... Except that it's useful sometimes. And it's scary. I tell you, it scares me. I've known some guys that they got to a point where this is the only meetings they went to are meetings where they talked. Dangerous. That's a closed system, right? How's God going to talk to me through you if it's just me, right? Dangerous deal. Finally, tradition number 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. I'm embarrassed to tell you, I'm a knucklehead sometimes. I was sober somewhere between 15 and 20 years sober before I realized what that meant. Here's what I thought it meant. I thought it meant that I was supposed to put the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous ahead of your obviously screwed up personalities. And it doesn't mean that at all. There's only one personality in this room that's the source of my separation and conflict. There's only one personality. I have to work these principles and put them before. I must subjugate myself and push myself into the back seat and put these things foremost in my life. And I am the source of my conflict. I almost died of alcoholism because I couldn't get in here because I couldn't stop judging you. I couldn't hear you because I kept picking you apart. And if I ever leave Alcoholics Anonymous, I think it will be the same mechanism. I think that I will judge myself out of AA one judgment at a time. Or my ego will rise up and I will compromise my actions as if I don't need to do that stuff the little people do anymore. Right? And I will incrementally leave AA because I will have put my personality ahead of the principles. It is the principles that save Bob from Bob. And it is the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous where our redemption comes from. And the problem is alcoholism is cunning, baffling, powerful, and patient. And it doesn't matter if I'm sober over 30 years, over 50 years. Alcoholism waits for guys like me. It's a predator. It circles the herd. It's circling this room today. And it just waits. And it waits to get a foot in and it clamors. And it says things to us continually. If you ever saw the movie, the second movie in The Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, there was a scene in there where this King Theoden's sitting on the throne and he's in the spell of an evil force. and the minion of the force is sitting next to him. It's a guy called Wormtongue, and he's clamoring in his king's ear. Don't listen to those people. That guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Do you know? Well, you don't have to listen. You know, he cheated on his wife. You can discount everything he says. You know, he's so full of himself. Look at the way he talks in meetings. And gradually, incrementally, I will leave AA, one person at a time. And I want to close by reading the long form of the 12th tradition, which I think is one of the most beautiful things Bill has ever written. It's unbelievable. The first, in my home group, my old home group, and my new home group, we read the long form of the traditions, not every week, but like once a month. And if you've ever watched, I love to watch the new people as they read them. They just sit there and roll their eyes. And then the reader gets to and most of them think the first two words of the 12th tradition, they think that the readers injected them into there, but because it says, and finally. And finally, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the principle of anonymity has an immense spiritual significance. It reminds us that we are to place principles before personalities, that we are actually to practice a genuine humility, this to the end, that our great blessings may never spoil us, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of Him who presides over us all. Thank you for listening.